Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and to some surprise, AMD seemingly just announced the release date for the next generation Xbox console. Yeah, this was a big surprise, but we are going to talk about that today and what this means for both gamers and for Xbox alike. Now, we also got some updated numbers from Nintendo, which included some good and then also some not so good news, or at least on the surface. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with a brand new Vita console, and no, this is not a joke, or, I guess partially. This is actually the Anbernic RG Vita and the RG Vita Pro, and if you don't know who they are, they make emulation handheld consoles, and it seems like every few months they announce a new form factor that replicates a popular handheld. They did it for the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP, the Nintendo DS, and as you can see here, their next project is focused on the PlayStation Vita. Now, I personally love the PlayStation Vita. Despite its shortcomings, it's actually one of my favorite consoles. I have a lot of very fond memories with it. And the thing is that Anbernic is a good company. I can say that firsthand. I do have their Game Boy Advance form factor, but one thing that kind of keep in mind with them is that they typically focus on budget-friendly options, which is why I find it interesting that they are offering a Pro model. Now, I don't know if that's to maybe add an OLED display to replicate the original PlayStation Vita, or if it's to add in higher-rated specs that will actually be capable of emulating higher-power consoles. Either which way, though, if you like the Vita and its form factor, then you might want to keep an eye out for the RG Vita. We don't have a release date or specs just yet, but once we find out more, of course, I'll keep you posted. Now, here's another unexpected story because apparently Sonic Racing Crossworlds didn't meet Sega's internal expectations. In a recent earnings report, Sega mentioned that Sonic Racing Crossworlds surpassed 1 million units sold, but that's still below their expectations. Instead, they're aiming for another million units sold by the end of their fiscal year, which, to be fair, I think that is very possible. Sonic games do tend to have strong legs over time, and Crossworlds is debatably the best new kart racer on the market, depending on who you ask. But that's kind of my point. Regardless of what you think is the best, Crossworlds has received a lot of good word of mouth, and now we'll see if that will actually propel it to Sega's internal goal. My only thing about all this, though, is that this once again just kind of confirms how crazy modern-day development is. I remember, and it didn't feel like it was all that long ago, when 1 million units sold for these type of games would have been deemed a huge success. But here we are in 2026, and apparently that's just no longer the case. Budgets have gotten quite high by this point. Oh, and Nintendo dropped a ton of news today, and we might as well just go ahead and start off with one of their supposed 2026 titles. I don't know. Nintendo's kind of a strange company sometimes because if you remember last year, they dropped a random trailer for Splatoon Raiders, which basically told us nothing, and ever since then, they've been radio silent regarding that game. It was just such a weird announcement with no follow-up whatsoever, but here we are, and it's been pointed out that an updated trademark for Splatoon Raiders just appeared with a publication date of February 17th. Now, that is a very interesting date, just considering all of the rumors for a Nintendo Direct sometime this month, and really just the history of them doing a Direct for the month of February. So a lot of people are taking this information as maybe a potential day for a Nintendo Direct, and okay, it's not impossible, but I'm also going to just go ahead and say that this is far from a confirmation. Trademarks are often done in advance, so I think that if anything, the one thing that this probably tells us is that it's probably planned for 2026, but I just don't want anybody to look at this and get their hopes up for, a February 17th Direct. Again, could it happen? Yes, but I don't think that this is an absolute confirmation of that, and I'll just simply leave it at that. Now, however, this is where we start to get into Nintendo's recent financial results, where they revealed a ton, and I mean a ton of information. Now, I'm not going to go over everything that they talked about, but there are 3 very interesting stories that came from this And the first of which is just the insane amount of success that the Switch 2 has had for its first 6 to 7 months on the market. I mean, it was just a few months back when people were going crazy over the idea that it had a slower than expected holiday and that the PlayStation 5 outsold it, given that it was on discount during Black Friday. But when all is said and done, it is officially the fastest selling console of all time, and really it's not even close. The Switch 2 has already reached 17.37 million units sold, and just to put that into perspective, it took the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5 a year before it hit a similar number. So really, this is an incredible start for Nintendo. But I will also say this. A fast start doesn't necessarily define a generation. It's also important for them to sustain that success as the generation progresses. And that means that they will need to continue to put out some big games, not only this year, but for the years to come. Now, I think Pokemon Generation 10 will help them achieve their goals this year, but we also need to pay attention to prices as the year progresses. With the AI boom, rising prices could be on the horizon. That's been a big discussion for a while now, and that could impact the Switch 2 in a significant way if it does end up happening. Now, I'm crossing my fingers that it won't come to that, but the reality is that a price hike is very possible, and if that happens, it could change a lot of things for Nintendo going forward. Now, it's not just the Switch 2, though, that made waves today, because the Switch 1 sold an additional 1.38 million units last quarter, which officially makes it Nintendo's best-selling console of all time. It just surpassed the Nintendo DS, and it now sits comfortably at 155.37 million units sold. Now, it is still behind the PlayStation 2, which remains the best-selling console of all time, or at least according to Sony's updated information. That puts it beyond 160 million units. So we'll see if the Switch 1 can eventually track it down over time. But I think what Nintendo should do is to drop the price. It's kind of crazy that nearly a decade after the launch of the Switch 1, it still hasn't received a single price cut. And okay, that was fine while it was the main console and it was selling millions upon millions of units every single quarter, but clearly those days are long gone. So if Nintendo wants another surge of units sold for the Switch 1, then I think they need to drop the price finally. Now, as for software, this is where things start to take a turn for Nintendo. On one side, Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Pokemon Legends EA, and Kirby Air Riders have all sold incredibly well. Mario Kart World has topped 14 million units, in part thanks to its bundle. Donkey Kong Bonanza has been a big success with more than 4 million sold, and Kirby Air Riders sold 1.7 million units. However, you may have noticed the absence of one notable title, and that's for none other than Metroid Prime 4. Unfortunately, Nintendo has not given an update for how many units it sold, and that means that it did not surpass 1 million units sold on an individual SKU. Now, that is important to kind of keep in mind here, though, because Metroid Prime 4 is available on the Switch 1 and on the Switch 2, so with both platforms combined, it may have surpassed 1 million units sold. But for right now, we don't know that for an absolute fact, which has some fans concerned about the future of the Metroid Prime series. This game was in development for a very long time, and it likely cost Nintendo a lot of money to fund it. However, like I said, it is available in 2 SKUs. We have to keep that in mind. And also, it's only a short period of time, so it is possible that Metroid Prime 4 could still appear on their next report. So I would say, don't get too concerned just yet. The story still isn't completely over. I'll keep you posted as we learn more in the future. Personally, I hope it's performed well enough for them, not only because I think that Metroid Prime 4 is really one of the most underrated games from last year. Quite frankly, I think some of its complaints are drastically over-exaggerated. The desert's not exactly fun, I will say that, though. But I also think with player feedback and with a fresh start from the ground up rather than a reboot, that Retro Studios could make another really good Metroid Prime game. I mean, Metroid has never exactly been a big-time seller for Nintendo, but even still, it is a unique franchise within their library, and I just hope Nintendo gives it another chance. So, cross my fingers. All right, now let's just go and shift on over to some Xbox news because, to some surprise, AMD seemingly announced the release date for the next generation Xbox. In an earnings call, the CEO, and I'm going to repeat that, the CEO, somebody that has a lot of information, said, quote unquote, development of Microsoft's next generation Xbox featuring an AMD semi-custom system on a chip is progressing well to support a launch in 2027. So, there you go. The plan is for 2027. Now, however, plans could always change. We do have to kind of keep that in mind. Of course, we got recent reports that Sony is looking to delay the PlayStation 6 by multiple years because of the AI boom and rising prices. But I feel like Sony and Xbox are in two completely different situations. I think price is a much more threatening factor to PlayStation's business model because they are looking to capitalize on a more traditional console market, and they really rely on the success of their consoles. Whereas Xbox, they've really adopted this more multi-platform business, and from everything that we know, their next console is a PC hybrid. And I think with that, it could share a similar price to what you could expect from a good PC. I think Xbox is aiming for a premium console, aka the most powerful console that we've ever seen before, and I don't think that they're afraid to target a price that goes beyond what you would expect from a console-like experience. Truthfully, I would not be shocked if they go beyond $1,000 for their next console, and I think that's for a few different reasons. One is because this would actually help differentiate Xbox from the PlayStation 6. Yes, they might put all of their games on the PlayStation 6, but if you want an ultra-premium option, the most powerful console on the market by far, then that will be the next generation Xbox. Also, there have been rumors about OEM partner Xbox consoles. Their next console more so seems to be about the operating system that combines Windows with an Xbox front end. So technically, they could license out that operating system and partner up with companies like ROG as one such example. And who knows, maybe one of these OEM devices will target a more budget-friendly option. And then lastly, the Xbox business doesn't really rely on how many consoles they sell in quite the same way that Sony relies on their console business. So if the next Xbox only sells 10 to 20 million units, I think Xbox would be more than okay with that. Personally, I think their next Xbox is being created as their end goal for their hardware business, if you will. It will be a device that not only can evolve for years into the future with more partnerships, but their first-party option will be to specifically cater to their most hardcore fans that wants to remain within their ecosystem. So in other words, I don't really think it's as likely for them to delay the next Xbox, is what I'm trying to say. Now, could it still happen? Absolutely yes. But as of right now, their plan absolutely seems to be for 2027. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you think the next Xbox will launch in 2027? And if so, do you think that that's too soon or not? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.